This is the Brave New Coin Crypto Conversation, hosted by Andy Pickering.
Hi everyone, Andy Pickering here. I'm your host and welcome to the Crypto Conversation, a Brave New Coin podcast where we talk to the people building the future in the Bitcoin, blockchain and cryptocurrency space. This episode is brought to you by BNC Pro, the brand spanking new digital wealth platform featuring an all-in-one suite of customizable institutional grade applications that help you manage your crypto investments. Yes, research, chart, screen, analyze, optimize, report, and more. BNC Pro is the ultimate portfolio tool for individual or enterprise use. Streamline your workflow, manage your crypto, and master this brave new asset class your way with BNC Pro. Go to bnc-pro.com now to create your free account, or just look for the link in the show notes to this episode. Now, on with the show. My guest today is Stephen Macaskill. Stephen is the OGest Bitcoiner I know. He is a true hardcore coiner. He's a libertarian and he is an anarcho-capitalist from the Austrian School of Economics. Stephen is also the co-founder of the Dasset Digital Asset Exchange. I know that's quite the intro. Welcome to the show, Stephen.
Thank you so much for having me, Andy.
Like I said in the intro, you know, you're an OG Bitcoin guy, a hardcore Bitcoiner in the truest sense. So today I'd like to talk about the Dasset Exchange, and I think I understand you have some news and some announcements there. And, you know, after that, perhaps I know you're very opinionated on politics, the economy, money, gold, and all that good stuff. And because it's such an intense time in the world, it might be good fun to touch on all of that too. So first off, though, let's just set the scene. Where are you from, and how did you end up in New Zealand? Because you are based here in New Zealand. So yeah, where are you from?
Yeah, I moved to New Zealand 4 years ago from Colorado in the US. And there's a lot of similarities between Colorado and New Zealand with the people, the outdoors, the culture, and the economy. And so for me, it made a lot of sense. And it's strange because people always ask me, why did you move to New Zealand of all places? It's been difficult to explain to them, you know, beyond how beautiful it is. And, you know, it's like living in paradise. But everything that's happening in the US right now is partly why I'm here, because right now there's a lot of turmoil over there, and it doesn't seem to be it seems to be getting worse before it gets better.
I could not agree more. Look, let's talk about Dasset first, and then perhaps after that we can talk more about your background, because I know you do have quite an interesting background. And you know, we can go down the Bitcoin rabbit hole a little bit more. But let's talk about Dasset, and I suppose just very quick disclosure, Tekami, the company that owns Brave New Coin, is also an investor in Dasset, so let's just get that out of the way. Please tell us, what is Dasset?
Yeah, so Dasset is New Zealand's trading platform for digital assets like Bitcoin. And so we provide the ability for Kiwis to buy, sell, and trade cryptocurrencies with New Zealand dollars. So we provide the on-ramps and off-ramps between the legacy financial system and the digital asset financial system. And it came about through looking at the market 4 years ago, and there was a 20% premium over the global spot prices of cryptocurrencies in New Zealand because of the lack of liquidity, the lack of an exchange to provide that liquidity in the region. And so there was a clear market need for a platform to bring that liquidity here. And since then, we've helped correct the price, and the price has dropped about, or the spread on crypto has dropped by something like 80%. So now, compared to global spot prices, cryptocurrencies are within a 1 to 3% margin.
Yes. And well, look, I remember, Stephen, you know, when I first began to get interested in Bitcoin, and this was early 2017. And I remember meeting you at, I guess it was some kind of meetup. You might have been speaking somewhere. And I remember meeting you and then seeing you around at some of the Bitcoin meetups in the halcyon days of 2017, I guess. And there was some of the people that were going to the meetups, they were talking about this exchange that Stephen Macaskill was building. You've sort of been working on this for a long time now, and it's really now come to full fruition. But I'm interested in what that journey has been like, because we live here in New Zealand, but on a global scale, New Zealand is a small market, and so if the crypto asset market is a niche market even now globally, probably even a smaller market in New Zealand. So what are the challenges in starting a new digital asset exchange in a small market, and also, I guess, from 2018 on, probably a bear market as well?
Yeah, well, so we launched late 2017, and the biggest challenge for us was, or at least when launching, was around banking. We went to various stakeholders, investors, regulators, banks, to get our ducks in a row, make sure that we're compliant and following all New Zealand rules and regulations. And once we got to that point, when we got to the banks, we were stopped multiple times. We essentially went to every single bank within New Zealand, and they were very hostile towards the industry. We're fortunate enough that a dozen other exchanges came or attempted to come before us, and they had all gone to the banks, and they continue to get shut down by the banks. And I guess it's important to see how the banking system in New Zealand works, where the majority of banks in New Zealand are actually Australian owned. What they do, or what I found that they do, is they not only interpret New Zealand legislation how they see fit, but they also enforce it. So although the regulators were quite happy with our business and our business model and the way that we were complying with New Zealand regulations, the banks were uncomfortable. And I can understand it from the bank's perspective. As a new industry, they don't have a risk model for our business or our industry. They're very skeptical, very conservative, and they don't have the policies in place to service a business like ours immediately. And so for them to change and add those policies takes 6, 12, 18, 24 months. And so for us, it was really a case of education, where we had to do a lot of crypto and blockchain 101s to help them understand the technology and how it could benefit them. And then over that time, they started coming around and started working with us. So I'd say that was the biggest challenge, followed by our technology. So we decided to go with a technology provider. We white labeled our platform, and this technology provider has provided a number of software for exchanges such as Bittrex and BTCC, so some of the largest crypto exchanges in the world. But they really dropped the ball and had a number of security incidences and issues. And some of their customers, for example, the exchange of Norway, London, Canada, were all using their platform. And those security breaches resulted in those exchanges going bankrupt. And we really weren't happy with our relationship with them. And fortunately for us, we decided early on that most of our customer funds would be held offline. And so we weren't affected by any of their security incidences, but they made us very concerned for our customers and customer funds. And so we made the decision last year to transition away from that technology partner and bring our technology in-house. And so with the help of Blockchain Labs, which is the best blockchain development house south of the equator, we managed to build our infrastructure in-house and upgrade our system and develop a new liquidity partnership with a company called Bittrex. Bittrex is one of the largest crypto exchanges in the world. And with that partnership, we're able to bring their liquidity to the Oceania region. And so with this upgrade and migration to our own infrastructure, we can now provide customers with the largest range of digital assets at the best rates against an ability to place advanced orders, unlike anyone else within New Zealand. We're set up to service both retail and institutional customers, and we're starting to see a lot of institutional demand within the region.
Yes, interesting, Stephen. And I know that press release with the Bittrex partnership announcement is going out this week. And I guess that was sort of, what I was hinting at as well. One of the problems with setting up a new exchange in a small market like New Zealand is, as you point out, it's difficult to get liquidity. So maybe just at a high level, explain how that works with the Bittrex partnership and what that means in terms of providing a deeper liquidity and I suppose a wider range of assets available for trading.
Yeah, so without liquidity, and I guess going back to trying to understand what liquidity is, so it's a pool of funds in a certain asset. So it could be New Zealand dollars, it could be US dollars, it could be something like Tesla shares. And so it's a pool of assets where people can go to buy and sell those assets. And so if there's a market where there are no buyers and sellers and they haven't really put funds into that pool, that means that there's low liquidity, and that means that people can really have a lot more control over the pricing that they can charge. And so they might have a higher price when selling, or when buying have a lower price. And so things get a lot more expensive because you can't, there's a lot less buyers and sellers. And so and it's funny because liquidity begets liquidity. So the more funds in this pool, the more funds it attracts. And so that when there's more crypto and there's more New Zealand dollars or dollars in this pool, then prices become more attractive and people want to access those prices. And so Bittrex does about 50 million New Zealand dollars in trading volume a day, and has over $500 million in crypto assets in its custody. And so we are able to tap into that liquidity and access it and provide that to our customers in the Oceania region. And so because of the large number of market makers and traders already on the Bittrex platform, they have some of the most competitive rates in the world. And so as an on-ramp, off-ramp on the New Zealand side, so having all the right regulations to allow New Zealanders to deposit New Zealand dollars, we're able to help those customers with the New Zealand dollars tap into and access this large pool of crypto liquidity that Bittrex has, and help match buyers and sellers.
Fantastic. Well, you mentioned the Oceania region. So which countries can use Dasset at the moment? Is it just New Zealand, or is it New Zealand and Australia as well? And are there plans to expand beyond that?
Yeah, so today Australians and New Zealanders can use our platform, and so we can onboard them. For Australians at the moment, they can only trade crypto to crypto. They can deposit crypto and buy New Zealand dollars, but they can't withdraw New Zealand dollars to Australia yet. That is something that we are working on. So you can expect Australian dollars on our platform fairly shortly.
Excellent. How are you going in terms of attracting new customers or new traders to the platform? Because that's also one of the challenges. You know, there are so many different, I suppose, options available to, you know, the average newbie coming into the space now. Even, you know, compared to back in 2017, you know, that was, I remember, you know, I mentioned that I met you and I was very much new to the space then, but one of the reasons I was going along to those meetups was it was just very difficult as a Kiwi back in those days to figure out how to actually get into some crypto. There weren't really any exchanges, and you know the easiest way really was to go along to a meetup and try and buy some in person. But now that has obviously changed, and we do have all these different on-ramps, but it's one thing to have the on-ramps, then you've got to market them. And of course, you have to explain the you know, the benefits of Bitcoin, what a blockchain is, and all that is. It can be a bit of a technical barrier for people to, you know, hurdle over in the early days as they go on their crypto journey. Yeah, how do you solve that? How do you get people into the system?
Yeah, I mean, we still suffer from a user interface and user experience. You know, those are major problems that need to be resolved before we can scale. The ability for somebody to, you know, lose your password or lose your private key or secret, and those funds are gone forever is a major concern, because you know, we don't want a lot of customers getting into digital assets and then losing those assets forever because it's new. And so that's always a challenge. And so it's interesting because as a trading platform with advanced orders within New Zealand, we're the only ones. However, there are a number of other providers, brokers, retailers, and they work on providing the ability for retail to easily acquire and buy digital assets. They make it really easy for a large number of customers, and they have to tap into a liquidity platform or an order book. And so we're not necessarily platform for everyone. We do provide services to retail and have a number of retail customers, but as a liquidity provider, we are also providing services to other crypto businesses and institutional customers that are trying to tap into that liquidity, large amounts of digital assets at, you know, the best rates possible. And so some of our products that we offer isn't something that a retail customer would use, and that's, for example, our API. So an API is something that a trader or a programmer would use, or an institutional customer that wants to do high-frequency trading to either market make or provide liquidity to other customers such as retail. So yeah, so historically, we've been very quiet on the marketing front. We've been focusing a lot more on our operations, technology, compliance, and getting all of our ducks in a row. Now that we have brought our technology in-house, we really like where our product is going and we can stand behind it 100%. We are ready for customer growth and expansion. And so we're currently going through a Series A. We're raising funding so that we can focus squarely on that customer growth. And so it's been quite a journey for us, and we're only just opening up in terms of our marketing and letting the world know that we exist.
And do you see any, you know, you're from Colorado, as you mentioned, and look, I know you've been a Bitcoiner for a long time, but do you see any differences in terms of what is happening in New Zealand and Australia in terms of their attitudes or openness to Bitcoin and crypto assets?
Slightly. You know, New Zealand has some of the lowest adoption for digital assets in the world, where Australia isn't at that level. I'd say that as a percentage, Australians own 3 to 4 times more or 3 to 4 times more Australians own crypto than New Zealanders. So my understanding is it's between 3 to 5% of Australians own some form of digital asset, where it's about 1% or less in New Zealand. And New Zealand's banking system was modernized in the late 90s, and they kind of leapfrogged a lot of the problems that banks around the world are facing today in places like the United States. But the other thing is New Zealand is the same size as Colorado, 4.5–5 million people. It's very small and doesn't have that economies of scale. So from a banking perspective, they are able to move a lot faster. They have less infrastructure, less bureaucracy, and so that's what helped them, I think, make transactions so much faster within New Zealand compared to the rest of the world. When you talk about checkbooks here, people laugh, but most people in the U.S. still pay rent with their checkbooks. So New Zealand has a lot of catching up to do, but I don't really see New Zealand as a leader in the digital asset space. If you look at where the greatest adoption is happening, it's South Africa has the 3rd highest adoption rate for crypto. You see a lot of adoption in places like Vietnam, Indonesia, Nigeria, Venezuela. And for those countries where there's a lot more instability and uncertainty, then it makes a lot more sense for those people to invest in digital assets. Where New Zealand, I think, is going to be pulled by the rest of the world in terms of its adoption. So I'd say that New Zealand's slightly different from the rest of the world in that regard.
Yes, look, I completely agree. New Zealand, we, for better or worse, and I think you'd have to say for better, generally, we, you look around at the world at the moment, and New Zealand is a fairly safe and a calm political environment. And look, we're a green zone even in terms of the pandemic. So people are perhaps, slightly more risk averse and don't have that uncertainty around them to really make them just look a little bit outside of their comfort zone, look at how they could perhaps hedge their financial future.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's just finish off on Dasset. Stephen, what assets are available outside of Bitcoin? And are you a Bitcoin exchange, or are you a digital asset exchange? Do you want to have a big wide range of assets? What's the thinking there?
Yeah, so we currently have 37 assets in our platform, including New Zealand dollars. And they're a range. We have I think that we do a really bad job in the industry with our terminology. And so we call everything a cryptocurrency. But I'd say, there are very few cryptocurrencies out there. Those are the digital tokens like Bitcoin, Bitcoin Cash, Litecoin, and a few others. So we do have a few of those major cryptocurrencies that are similar to Bitcoin.
Proof of work cryptocurrencies, in other words.
Yep, that are used for payment and have the potential of being currency down the road.
Yep.
But then we also have digital tokens that are more platform based, like Ethereum, EOS, Neo, and where developers can create applications and utilize this kind of virtual computing network to create dApps or decentralized applications. And then we actually have tokens that represent certain some of these applications. So they're second layer solutions that are attempting to provide services that we know and use today, but through a decentralized means. And some of the services are new, like decentralized prediction market, like Augur, where some of them are old ideas. We offer digital tokens like Storage, which are focusing on decentralized cloud storage. And so we have a mix, and customers invest or trade them for various reasons.
And look, I hope this isn't too awkward a question, but I've always thought of you as a real Bitcoin guy, right? And I may even have this wrong, but how do you reconcile the idea of founding an exchange and opening it up to trading with a multitude of different assets that also some would argue can potentially compete with Bitcoin or take the focus away from Bitcoin? Do you look at it like that, or are you completely separate it and you just say, look, if someone wants to trade an asset, that's up to them, and we'll make it available to them? Is there any tension between what your beliefs are and what you do with Dasset?
I don't think so. So, there's been a few arguments in the industry over the last decade around some of this, and I was fortunate enough to wean myself out of this thought process when I first looked at Bitcoin, because at that time I was running a precious metals company, and so my idea was sound money was gold and silver. And that was the best form of analog money. And, we transitioned to a new form of money that wasn't so sound. And so when somebody first introduced me to Bitcoin in 2011, I laughed at it. It's intangible. You can't touch it. And there's no way that we could have something like this as money in the future. It has to be gold and silver. So I was, I guess, a gold maximalist over Bitcoin. But I realized that at the end of the day, it's really consumers that have the choice, and it's up to them to decide through the market which products are useful for what services. And so I understood, it's not really me to decide. There's no way that I can be God and say, okay, this is going to be the currency of the future. It's really up to the consumers in the market, where through choice and through voluntary interaction that we are able to discover products, the services that meet our needs and wants in the future. And so when in maybe 2013, there was this idea that Bitcoin, one blockchain to rule them all. And so everyone thought that Bitcoin is the only token, everything else is a scam, and it needs to get thrown out the window. And so, it created these Bitcoin maximalists. And while I have always been a big fan of Bitcoin, it's really not me to decide that that Bitcoin is the future. It's really an aggregation of all the people in the community and the decisions that they make that will help determine whether Bitcoin will be a great form of money or a great commodity in the future. And so if it's not Bitcoin, then it's not Bitcoin. I don't really have, it's not up to me to be the decider and go one way or the other. It's really up to what the market decides. And so from a Dasset perspective, our goal is to give consumers choice and allow them to discover the digital assets and that fit their needs and wants. And so we're just providing the marketplace for the consumers to pick the winners and losers. And although, I'd say over the last couple of years, I've gained a lot more confidence in Bitcoin because of how it succeeded. Today, it's still the largest distributed computing project in the world. It's the most decentralized digital asset in the world. And what it has overcome in terms of, it's been on just an enormous journey and has gone up against every kind of problem and issue in the world over the last 10 years. And it's still here and it's stronger than ever. That gives me a lot of confidence in Bitcoin. But, the future is up in the air. We could have another digital currency. It could be closed source for all we know, that just comes out of nowhere and takes the world on by storm and gives Bitcoin a run for its money. I just don't know. And so that's where I'm here for the journey, and I'm here to see how things unfold.
Oh, fantastically said, Stephen. I enjoyed that, and I very much agree. The market will decide, but we're all part of the journey and along for the ride. And look, you touched on, Bitcoin's origin story, and, one of the fascinating things about Bitcoin is, Bitcoin's roots, if you like, or the origin story, it really does touch on, bits and pieces from everything from Austrian economics to libertarian politics to cypherpunks to cyberpunks to sound money and gold bugs and even anarcho-capitalism, and all this stuff is one part of Bitcoin's story, and I think it's also one part of your story as well. So I'd love to just touch on some of this stuff, because do you describe yourself as coming from a libertarian background, or is it anarcho-capitalism? And what do these terms mean in 2020? And is this what you relate to? I don't want to put a label on you, but let's just touch on it.
Yeah, I mean, that term libertarian is a bit loaded, because I don't think many libertarians understand that term, and everyone wants to use it. And so I like to utilize voluntarious. So I'm a big fan of anything that's voluntary, any human interaction that doesn't initiate aggression or initiate the use of force. And so any human interaction that's voluntary, that doesn't use coercion, I'm promote and I'm a fan of. And so from a philosophical perspective, I think that creates a lot less violence, a lot more peace. And then from an economic perspective, I believe it helps allocate resources most efficiently to help us manage our environment and help those people most in need of those resources. And so so from an economic and philosophical perspective, I would say that voluntary interaction trumps coercive interaction. And so I look at it from the economics from an Austrian economic perspective, and then from a philosophical perspective, looking at it from that nonviolence philosophy.
Sure. And look, these are the Austrian economics school of thinking. That's obviously a fairly big, deep rabbit hole in itself, and so is really libertarianism. But what I'd maybe like you to do is, it's just such a crazy time in the world right now. Here we are, not even halfway through 2020, and starting right at the beginning of the year, every month has just seen the world get a little bit more crazy. And particularly now, and as you look back to your the place of birth or your home country, the United States of America, things are popping off there, Stephen. So, from your perspective, if you're looking at it from, a philosophical point of view, what do you think has gone wrong, and is there a better way forward?
That's a difficult question. It's a very difficult question. I guess some of, and this is biased based on my background, but I would say that some of the biggest issues goes back to 1971, when the United States went off the gold standard. When that happened, it really enabled the U.S. government or the U.S. to spiral out of control. And over the last 10 years, $1 trillion has been spent on warfare in the Middle East, and the U.S. isn't even at war with those nations, and so or an officially declared war. And so, the ability to print, we have kind of this moral hazard. We have fiscal policy, which is meant to balance the budget, bring in taxes, and pay for goods and services like schooling and roads, and balance it out. But we now have this incentive, or this kind of hazard, where, well, we can't afford everything we want to afford, and so we'll look at monetary policy to print some money And so we're going to cheat a little bit every year and just print a little bit more and print a little bit more. We're going to spend it on this and we're going to spend it on that. Now we're spending money on everything and we're trying to solve everyone's problems. And so I'd say that this, these good intentions have really led down a bad road, and has created a very toxic environment where there's enormous spending all over the place. That money gets lost. The issues that are meant to be resolved or helped aren't really being addressed. And then we see these, something called rent seeking, where a lot of entities are no longer trying to create value, but they are lobbying to prevent competition, or they're lobbying to acquire access to that freely printed money. And so rather than creating value to consumers, they're extracting wealth. And so that's not really a good environment, I'd say, to be in. And in terms of where we're going in the future, that's who knows. I really have I'd say history repeats itself, and in terms of what's happened with the U.S. dollar and the U.S. empire, we can look at the British Empire and the Roman Empire to see a lot of similarities, especially comparing the U.S. dollar to the Roman Empire, and seeing how their currency collapsed. But today the issue is the U.S. dollar is the world reserve currency. So 80-90% of all trade and debt is held in U.S. dollars. So it's created an enormous amount of systemic risk, where we don't really know what the people, the entities that are in control of the U.S. dollar, what the heck they're going to do with all the political issues within the U.S. And so, although moving forward, we can look at what's happened before, but there are new variables that give consumers choice, and so things may play out a bit differently. Like, so I suspect that we're entering a phase where the U.S. dollar is losing its dominance as a global reserve currency, where it could drop from 80 to 90% in global trade to maybe 40 to 50%. But what happens there? Does that mean another currency, national currency, will take its place? And I'm not so sure. I think we're going to have a time of a lot more currency competition and choice, and this is where digital assets that are bound by the laws of physics could potentially restore sound money, or a stable monetary system could, like gold and silver did 40 years ago, 50 years ago, could come back and give the dollar a run for its money. And so I'm hoping that that's the case, because I think that'll cause a lot less pain for people around the world that may suffer from something like a major currency collapse. We definitely don't want the US dollar to collapse in a big way. I don't think that would happen. We see something like $9 trillion in paper money being printed out of thin air, or from this coronavirus lockdown. I would say if we really want to derail the dollar, it's going to have to be something absurd like $100 trillion printed overnight. And then we'll see things like hyperinflation and things spiraling out of control. I don't think we're going to get there. A lot of people think, the dollar is going to collapse tomorrow. I don't think it's going to be like that. It's still going to be around for the next 10, 20 years. Just in what form and how much control is going to be the question.
Yes. Look, I was reading the book Bitcoin Billionaires. It's a book by Ben Mesrich. It's the story of the Winklevoss twins, but it's also it's a really good, almost anthropological study of Bitcoin's early days or early years, right? And on one side you have the the early Bitcoin adopters, a lot of them were libertarians, people like Roger Ver and Eric Voorhees, and their view, and perhaps it's the same view that they have today. It's they're in Bitcoin because they can see the flaws in government issued fiat currency, and they're about the separation of money and state and all the other libertarian values. On the other hand, you have people like the Winklevoss twins, who come from perhaps a slightly more traditional background, and their view is probably that Bitcoin can be integrated into the existing financial system, and there doesn't necessarily need to be a separation between the two. Do you think there's still a kind of tension between those two ideas?
Potentially. I think that they help each other. F.A. Hayek wrote a essay maybe 40 years ago now, called Choice in Currency, A Way to Stop Inflation. And previously, if you think about the dollar or the currency as a product, we haven't really had options because of things like legal tender legislation. So the dollar is a monopoly. U.S. has a monopoly on the currency in the United States. And so in some case, in some perspectives, it is monopoly money. And but when and previously we haven't had that competition, because anything created in the physical world, in the analog world, could be confiscated. And so anyone who attempted to create a physical currency that competed with the US dollar would be stamped out very quickly, and historically was. But creating a currency in the digital space that is decentralized, that couldn't be stopped, has created a profound effect in essentially a check and balance with the dollar. And so for the short to medium term, this could really help create better monetary policy, where, since 2010, the US dollar has lost 50% of its purchasing power, 50% of its value, where Bitcoin has not. It's grown in value. And so by giving consumers choice, where they can preserve their wealth in something that doesn't devalue every year, like Bitcoin or gold, or they put their value in something that does devalue every year, like the US dollars, then people are going to over time preserve their wealth in things that don't deteriorate. And so that forces the stewards of national currencies to be a lot more conservative, because they don't want to lose that consumer faith and that consumer use of those currencies. And so short term, crypto could help the US dollar maintain its stability and have less inflation and less money printing, just because the stewards don't want consumers to move away from using the dollar. So in some ways, they kind of help each other.
Absolutely, that makes sense. And look, not to talk too much about books from past times, but another book that, and I think you and we've talked about this before a little bit, it's The Sovereign Individual, it was published in the mid-90s, I think, but it's a reasonably well-known book in crypto circles, libertarian circles too, I think. And the essential thesis of the book is that the internet and information age would change our lives, and the book made a number of predictions. But the weird thing is that every month now it just seems to become a little bit more accurate in terms of its predictions. So it was effectively making the case that digital technology would make the world more competitive, more unequal, and more unstable, and societies would slowly fall apart. The governments would lose the ability to tax their populations, and only the most self-reliant, technologically adept sovereign individuals, they would be sort of best placed to surf, the potential chaos of the modern world. And so, the book predicted the rise of, social media, cryptocurrencies, cyber warfare, even, this idea of, these online bots trying to imitate humans to influence political discourse. So, they were talking about all this back in the mid-90s, and we've seen all these sort of different, themes really taking place right now, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a bizarre world. We're in a universe where strange things are happening, and I would say I'd agree with a lot of what you said, except I don't think that technology is separating or tearing society apart potentially. So I do think it's giving the government a run for its money by providing goods and services that compete with government services better than what the government can provide. And so in that perspective, I think it's creating a lot more value for end users and helping human flourishing. But I do believe that technology is helping, or will help in the future, bring people together a lot more and help connect people and create a lot more direct collaboration. So I do think it's going to help build up communities and empower communities while disempowering authoritarianism or centralized top-down planners. And the reason, and I can see this in Bitcoin, so that, they say Bitcoin is trustless, and what they mean is, Bitcoin lowers counterparty risk. You don't have to trust a third party with your assets. You have complete ownership over your assets. The counterparty risk is now in the software code. Do you think that open source software code is reliable and cannot be compromised, as opposed to, is it safe with another company or a person, and are the funds really there? And so with that, when people trade and use Bitcoin, they have to do a lot more due diligence and work directly with the person that they're trading with. So, for example, a merchant or consumer on the internet has to put a lot more faith in the merchant that they are buying or selling with. If you're buying something from a merchant on the other side of the world with Bitcoin, you can't do a chargeback, you have no recourse. And so you have to put a lot more faith and trust in that merchant, which means that you're going to be working directly with that merchant. You're going to be contacting them. You're going to be developing that relationship with them. You're not going to be going through third-party, credit card companies and have all these middlemen between you and that merchant. So it's breaking down barriers and allowing people to engage and interact with each other directly. And also from, if you look at different currencies, they're very national currencies. They're very geopolitically divisive and have a lot of politics built into them, where I guess crypto does have politics built into it, where people are tribal, Bitcoin versus Litecoin, that kind of thing. But the collaboration globally is astounding. We have people from every country in the world that are part of the Bitcoin ecosystem and helping to improve it and make it better through all kinds of means, from just using it to providing development to companies building infrastructure. They say that all this mining is happening in China, but there are thousands and thousands of companies all over the world that own those mining operations in China. And so it's really, from that perspective, I think that technology is helping us in a big way. And it's also masked inflation. So we've had this huge devaluation of currencies, national currencies, over the last 2 decades. but the growth rate of technology, being able to have a device in your hand that's more powerful than the computers that they used to send to the moon, and it costs, a couple $100 to $1,000 is mind-boggling. And that's due to technology acceleration. And so technology, I think, has been one of our only saving graces from this absurd money printing.
Yes, hard to argue with that, Stephen. And look, you just have to hope that, of course, the flip side of that technology is, it could very easily be flipped on a nation state's population, and in terms of the ability to create a surveillance state is unparalleled at the moment. But look, we could talk about this stuff all day. I think, Stephen, let's just go to a very quick break, and then we'll come back and we'll finish off with the crypto conversation hot take round.
Great.
Whether you're an enterprise fund manager or a retail trader, buying and selling cryptocurrencies successfully requires price discovery you can rely on. Brave New Coin's liquid indices provide trusted US dollar prices for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Ripple. Featuring end-of-day or intraday outputs, you can count on the BLX, ELX, and XRPLX for accurate US dollar pricing for smart contract oracles, settlement price discovery, net asset valuation, and performance analysis. Visit bravenewcoin.com to find out more.
All right, we're back, and I'm with Stephen Macaskill. Stephen is the CEO of the Dasset Digital Asset Exchange. Stephen, I like to finish each podcast with a quick round of rapid-fire crypto conversation hot takes. Are you up for it?
I am.
Excellent. I just want your hot takes, your hot fire, take your best shot. Here we go. Stephen, where do you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-coin opportunist spectrum?
It's all up to the consumer to choose what's best. So I leave it to the market to decide.
Freedom of choice, let the market decide. Very good. All right, Stephen, what would you say is your firmest conviction crypto opinion?
Ooh, well, I do believe that digital currency like Bitcoin could become money and compete or take over as a global or universal form of money compared to a national currency.
Fantastic. Bring it on. I'm all about it. All right, Stephen, slightly contentious, but I ask every guest this question. Who do you think wins the American presidential election 2020?
I think it's going to be Trump.
Okay. All right. UBI, Stephen. So I used to ask this question, in the context of when Andrew Yang was talking about it a lot, and then it sort of dropped out of the conversation after, the pandemic and the economic crisis. UBI is kind of back in the conversation. I know you'll have big opinions here, but what's your hot take?
I think if it can be implemented voluntarily, then why not try it? It's definitely something that is that a lot of people find interest in it, but I think it's going to be difficult to do it where everyone consents to it from a voluntary perspective. But there are new technologies that could enable that, where there are digital currencies that have inflation built into them. That inflation could potentially be used for UBI, and as long as the participants on that platform agree to having their currency devalued to help everyone holding that token, then that could potentially be one way of implementing it. But I haven't really looked at it in detail, and I'd say as long as it's voluntary, then go for it.
Okay, nicely said, Stephen. Bill Gates famously said, you'll be aware of who Bill Gates is. He, of course, he's planted the pandemic, obviously. But Bill Gates famously said, we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. I was kidding about that, by the way. Don't believe in conspiracies. What does the blockchain space look like in 10 years' time?
Ooh, that's a tricky one. I would say, I hope that it is helping facilitate the adoption of artificial intelligence, the move away from cars and roads. I think it's going to help change society and flip it on its head. So, I want to see us with keys that are like vehicle keys that are tokenized on the blockchain that unlock your drone and help you, get from point A to point B without necessarily utilizing legacy transport systems. And so that would be pretty cool. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I suspect we're going to see something like that over the next 50 years.
Dude, we are. If Elon Musk can fly a rocket to a space station, drop off a couple of astronauts, and then land that rocket back on its ass on a 50-cent coin in the middle of the ocean, I have no doubt that, in 10 years' time, things will be very different. But look, well, similarly, William Gibson, sci-fi author, he said the future is already here, Stephen. It's just not evenly distributed. Can you think of an example of the future being here right now, but most people just aren't really aware of it?
Yeah, I mean, I see this 100%, and I'd kind of like to live my life like that as well, where I don't use a bank personally. I use crypto 100%. I don't really participate in the legacy financial system, so you can see that certainly in crypto. But I'd say there are pieces of technology in almost every aspect of our lives where we're either using or not using that really, 5 years ago would be, or 10 years ago would be crazy to think about it or realize. Yes,
indeed. Stephen, let's zoom out now. What do you see as the long-term future for the human race? Bit of a difficult one for a hot take, but do you see dystopia or utopia?
Ooh, I am hoping for utopia. We see a lot of short-term pain, a lot of rioting, but I am very, 10 years ago, I was so pessimistic and I would have said dystopia. But crypto, Bitcoin has lit a fire in me, and I'm more optimistic than ever about the future of humanity. And I think the next 20 years, we're going to double the amount of wealth that we've created over the last 2,000 years. And I think we're going to see human flourishing and human potential like we've never seen before. And that's partly going to be driven by the freedom of our financial independence.
I love it. Very nicely said. Stephen, finally, what is your favorite science fiction book, film, show, or universe?
Ooh, well, I really like Anthem by Ayn Rand. I really recommend that. It's a really short read. Recently, I saw Deuce. It's a sci-fi TV show and looks at quantum computing and certain things about how the universe works, and do we have free will or is everything predicted? And so they look at that, and it's a really interesting sci-fi TV show.
You said Deuce. Did you mean Devs? Is that Devs?
Oh, sorry, Devs. Yep.
Yeah, I haven't watched that yet myself, but it's on my watch list, and it sounds fascinating, and I think you described it really well. And yeah, as I understand it, has an incredible soundtrack and visual aesthetic and all that good stuff that makes for fantastic sci-fi as well.
I think it's certainly looking at the future of quantum physics and the questions that we're pondering today very well.
Excellent. Well, that's a great recommendation. I do need to start watching that myself. Stephen, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you for joining us today. We've gone down various different paths, and it's been fantastic. So, hey, nothing else to say except that the microphone is yours. Please tell the people where they can go to find you on your various platforms, or where they can go to find out more about Dasset, or what they need to know about Dasset. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Andy. It's been a pleasure talking with you and learning a little bit more about your podcast and discussing the world events. And so if you have an interest in Dasset, you can find us at dassetx.com. That's D like digital asset, DASSET X, dasset.com. And then for all of our social media, you can follow us with our handles on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Telegram at DassetX.
Awesome. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you so much.
Boom, there you go. That was today's episode. I hope you enjoyed that chat with Stephen Macaskill from Dasset. Been meaning to record with Stephen for quite a while now, so glad we got that one done. Stephen is a very interesting character and a great guy to chat to. Probably should have him on again maybe to talk about, I find it fascinating that Stephen is one of these guys that actually does live, as he said, outside the legacy financial system. He is, Bitcoin and crypto assets only. That's how he spends. He doesn't have a traditional bank account. I'm sure he has one for Dasset, but that's a separate story. Anyway, maybe we'll have Stephen back to tell the story of how you live on Bitcoin only. Anyway, links in the show notes to some of the things we talked about. Devs, that sci-fi show that Stephen mentioned, really got to see that. Have you seen it? Looks fantastic. Got to watch that. Also to Bitcoin Billionaires. That's a worthwhile read if you're at all interested in the Winklevoss twins, but also the early history of Bitcoin. Really enjoyed that book. The Sovereign Individual, also a little bit contentious, a little bit controversial. It's a favorite book of Peter Thiel, actually, very influential on his worldview, as I understand it. But yeah, I find it fascinating. Also, of course, links in the show notes to Dasset, the digital exchange, particularly if you're a New Zealand or Australian-based listener, then, hey, why not sign up? Give it a go. Thanks also to BNC Pro, who are the proud sponsor of the Crypto Conversation. BNC Pro is a new digital wealth platform. It features an all-in-one suite of customizable institutional-grade applications that help you manage your crypto investments. You can research, chart, screen, analyze, optimize, report, and more. And BNC Pro is the ultimate portfolio tool for both individual and enterprise use. So if you're interested, there's a link in the show notes to BNC Pro, or just go to bnc-pro.com to create your free account. Hey, if you did enjoy the show, please make sure you subscribe to the Crypto Conversation and give us a 5-star rating, positive review, and whatever podcast app you are using. All right, that's us. We're out of here. See you next time. This was the Crypto Conversation for Brave and New Coin. Boom. Shake, shake.